All right. Fritz, you want to start us off?
You want to just hop in?
Well-
Coldly open without a cold open? Just slap our listeners in the face with straight up episode material? That sounds harsh.
You mean not
Maybe
do an introduction? We should do an introduction.
Yeah? No,
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
like a cold open, you know? I was thinking I could do a cold open where I talk about us not doing a cold open and how that might be a bit harsh. And then we would end it with the theme song starting around here.
Okay.
You're the editor,
And then,
man. I don't know these things.
You know? About halfway through that theme song, when the vocals kick in, then I'm going to say, welcome to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Hello.
Hey.
Crazy day. Weird day.
It is a crazy day. You know, I was thinking about, we'd been talking about things to do in this inter-arc period, and one of them was, since we talked about many different kinds of Nazis, but we wanted to talk about some of the murky right-wing figures in Wagner and some of their Western supporters that are, let's say, some of their more vocal ones. And we will get around to that. But kind of in the process of talking about this yesterday, we suddenly got a whole lot of news of the Wagner group sending troops into
Wagner wilded out a bit.
Wagner suddenly got some more Western supporters.
Yeah, unexpected ones as well. Or maybe expected, I don't know.
Including the Russian Nazis fighting on the Ukrainian side, apparently.
Well, I was going to ask about that. I'm really curious about all that too. How the poor Nazis are handling this confusion, the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah,
maybe
there's
this is
been a
less
lot of
confusion,
cognitive dissonance, especially on. I was looking at some Serbian right-wing pro-Russia channels, and they were very split and having their minds blown today about.
They were just
who to
split.
support.
They were just split like a year ago. Now they got to go through another one.
Well, this is the solidly pro-Russia Telegram community, and then some of them were pro Prigozhin and Wagner, and some of them were sticking to Putin and saying that he's a traitor. And then some of them were just giving up on Russia altogether. So it's kind of an interesting day to go through. They're not our fucking brothers anyway. So there was a lot of interesting things happening, a lot of kind of crazy stuff happening in the last 24 or so hours. And so I guess we're pretty lucky today to get a hold of our comrade from Russia, Kolya, who's, I think, going to try to help us make sense of this whole thing and maybe offer some insight into what's going on. So, Kolya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me here.
Well, we're very happy to have you, especially since, we're rarely so up to date on things happening.
Never.
I mean,
never this up to date.
I think we just got word now that, I guess, Prigozhin got into some negotiations with Lukashenko or whatever, and now they're turning back around and going back to the front. All that said, Kolya, do you want to help us walk us through some of the events in the last 24 hours, and we can see where we go from there?
Sure. I mean, it's been like a long-standing standoff between the Wagner and the Ministry of Defense in terms of, the ammo that Wagner was supposedly not having, which there are contradictory reports about. And then, other things have happened. So Wagner private military company has been quite instrumental in taking Bakhmut in Ukraine. So, and that group has been viewed as heroes, basically in the Russian army and in the the political establishment. Well, and they have been considered as okay, this is a serious enemy. They have also. I mean, we're speaking about I'm not exactly sure in the numbers now, but it's dozens of thousands of Wagner fighters.
Prigozhin said 25,000.
20,
Yeah.
25,000. Okay. So that's about it. So what I can say for 24 hours, for past 24 hours, is that it's not really clear what really happened, because the whole like initial statement on what happened and why the march has been taking place, because Prigozhin has been representing this as like, okay, this was the last straw, like, now we are acting, now we're setting off on that march of justice, whatever. But the problem is that it's also just feels like kind of like a setup in some ways, just because of the videos that were published from the alleged spot where the Wagner like field camp was hit. It kind of looked like not very trustworthy.
Yeah, I saw that. Like it was, so they claimed that their camp was hit by a missile from the Russian military, right?
Yeah.
But it seemed, you see a lot of footage on Telegram throughout this war, and usually when something really big happens like that, you see kind of multiple accounts posting, different videos of the same thing. And in this case, I only kind of saw that one that they put out, in which you don't really see all that much.
Yeah, that's true. But even if they had like multiple videos, it still looked like a bit sketchy.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think later, I mean, I guess, as far as I know, none of us are like military experts here, but like I guess we could like talk a lot about this. But essentially what happened next is that they have went to cross Ukrainian-Russian border, and they went to they entered Rostov on Don. That's nearby border town in Russia, and they have taken it. Basically, they disarmed the military. They went into the bases and like their headquarters, and sat down like these generals that were there, and like the Prigozhin was like talking to them, blah blah, and they were planting like anti-tank mines on the streets. It's like we've seen videos of like people fighting each other for some reason, like, and like the Wagner soldiers, mercenaries, like standing around, searching people, putting them like face down to the asphalt, stopping cars, like basically, behaving like the law enforcement actor. And then they have moved on to Voronezh, and they were like, yeah, we're like marching in Moscow. We need Shoigu, who's that's a Russian like the head of the Minister of Defense.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, like we're here to like restore the justice. And then that looked quite serious for some time. I think there were like different reactions from all over the world. Like at that point, we can see different reactions. For example, the Ukrainian intelligence has been like, yeah, that looks like that could be true, but at the same time, they weren't Russian anywhere. Then we can see like one of the Russian like opposition kind of like prominent figures from the last 2 decades, like the Mikhail Khodorkovsky.
Oh right, yeah.
But basically he's been saying like, yeah, something in line with, all support that can be given to Prigozhin must be given, he is like taking on Kremlin, therefore like, whatever. So
yeah, kind of the enemy of our enemy type situation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So very like, pragmatic approach.
Prigozhin also kind of offered some improvised critique of the war, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has been speaking quite sharply on this topic for some weeks or maybe months now, criticizing how like, okay, there is this political establishment that has started the war, and there's this like generals who are like completely stupid and sending like thousands and tens of thousands and more people to the meat grinder without any kind of ammo, without any kind of like sufficient fire support, or basically massacring bunch of people, which is kind of funny because he was the ultimate part of that. Like, he
Right.
himself like single-handedly like sent like thousands and thousands and thousands of people to just die for bullshit. Like,
Yeah, I mean, he was even saying during the battles for Bakhmut that, like, he was losing like 100 guys a day. I mean, if that's not a meat grinder, I don't know what is. I mean, so
absolutely is.
I mean, I think the videos that preceded this kind of movement of troops yesterday was this one that got, I guess, one of these ones where he's criticizing the Ministry of Defense. And it was interesting to me when I was watching it because he specifically targets Shoigu and some other kind of top-ranking people in the Ministry of Defense, but he never mentions Putin by name in that video, which I thought was very curious.
And then Putin doesn't mention by name him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
In his speech. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, this is quite interesting. I mean, what happened next is that a bunch of generals have been releasing like videos saying like, hey, this is like a bad idea. Don't give in to the treason. Like this is our country. Like, kind of the West will dance on our bones, whatever. I don't know, like a lot of stuff. And it's like, bunch of generals, bunch of like people like making these statements. Also the heads of the regions, because so like the way Russian state is structured is called Russian Federation, and it's like this federative like subjects like regions or areas or etc. So the heads of different regions have been also making statements, and all of these statements from generals or from this like mayors or heads of the governments, like regional governments and stuff, they all were kind of, what do you call this in English? Like reiterating their commitment, kind of like, their what's the proper English word for it? Like that you are
loyalty,
still like,
maybe.
Loyalty, yeah.
Yeah.
Still like declaring their loyalty to the president, who is also the supreme commander at the same time.
Right.
So then after that, there's been some movement towards the Moscow. It seems like Wagner Con has been hit by airstrikes. I don't know how many, or I don't know if that actually happened. I mean, you can see videos in the internet, but whatever. And then I think also some of the Russian propagandists, like some of the Russian propaganda machinery, like actors who was like, working full on this, they have admitted losing 6 helicopters and 1 jet from like being attacked by Wagner.
So this is also kind of confusing to me, because now when Prigozhin announced that he's giving up on this march on Moscow, he said that so far, no blood was spilled, no Russian blood, and now we come to the point where this might happen, so this is why we are stopping, because we don't want to spill Russian blood, so we are returning to the base. But it seems that some people were killed by Wagner, no?
It seems so. I mean, I guess it's hard to determine like where it's true or not, because different sources are saying different information. And then also, like, I don't know what, like maybe for him, like killing a couple dozen people doesn't amount to much. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't mean spilling Russian blood or at all.
Yeah.
Or maybe, maybe he's being really dark, and then like, of course, if you like kill people like who are like flying in a helicopter or in a jet, like indeed there's not much blood spilled, literally. So I don't know, like
you have to be careful with how he phrases things, or how anything's phrased in these kind of propaganda things, because it's very
exactly.
It's very specific, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, in any case, be it this way or another way, he at some point turned back and announced that the march is finished and they're going back to the field camps, after apparently having had a conversation with Alexander Lukashenko, the Belarusian dictator.
Yeah.
The Belarusian ruler, and which is funny because like I don't know how it's been like represented in different like sources on the internet, but basically it feels like Putin like made call Kazakhstan there. The Kazakhstan president was like, well, this is like kind of seems like your internal affair. And then the Iran said the same thing, and then like the Erdogan, like the Turkish ruler, was like I think saying something similar in that line, but at the same time then like offering to participate in a peaceful management of this conflict,
Right.
etc., etc. And then Lukashenko makes his entrance to the scene, and
he's like, let me call him. He's a good guy.
yeah, yeah. And then Prigozhin picks up, and they have a good chat. And then Prigozhin's like, yeah, well, the show's over. Bye. And then now, actually, the spokesperson of the president, Dmitry Peskov, has said that Prigozhin is gonna go to Belarus.
Ah, okay, interesting.
And it's not clear exactly why or for how long, or like what's the purpose of this. Anyway, I mean, the situation is still unfolding, I think, and there's been a lot of different stuff happening. There's been like all sorts of opposition groups have been making claims ranging from like Godspeed Prigozhin, like let's support Prigozhin. He's taking on Kremlin, all the way to the Russian Volunteer Corps, as far as I know, predominantly neo-Nazi formation, has been their leader. I think is called White Rex or something like this.
Yeah.
Very, how do you call it? Like
notorious figure.
Yeah, and also very like epic name.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's like,
it literally means King of the Whites, doesn't it?
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
Rex,
that's a very humble name.
Yeah, right.
I mean, he's quite white. Like I can't. Yeah, okay, all right.
Could be. He could be.
Yeah, I guess that's the neo-Nazi hierarchy there. So.
Although my understanding is that he got residency in Germany as a teenager through a Jewish grandparent. So I guess some German sources revealed that. But this happens a lot with Nazis, and it doesn't stop them from being Nazis, I guess.
Really matter in the end. Yeah.
Wow.
The Nazi part matters the most.
Yeah.
Well, he's also Slavic. I mean,
there you go. I mean, really, yes, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, there's ranges of Untermenschen. He's checking off a couple.
Yes.
Exactly. Well, I mean, that guy has been saying like, okay, dig up your guns. That he assumes people have been digging in all over the time prior.
Just burying guns everywhere, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Like you just take your shovel, go to your yard, and then you dug up some machine guns and grenades and I don't know what.
Well, I mean, what a fun thing for kids to find, though. When I used to dig, I just find rocks,
Yeah. Well, so then quite like loud, like, and quite like loud statements have been made, like, yeah, do this, do that, like this is the historical day, like things are gonna go down right now. This is the, like glory to Russia, whatever, like, all these things. Different groups have been making different claims. Like I think also like anarchists have been more or less prominent with like kind of like analyzing the situation and saying basically we do not have a side to stand on except ourselves in that situation. So they were like, let these dogs to like bite and bleed each other. Meanwhile, we can try to figure out what to do. And I mean, also kind of like reckoning that if there will be like a crisis situation, like, food or water or any other kind of stuff like shortage, that there will be like some impulse to self-organize and set up like some mutual aid structures well, like to be realistic, the like anarchist movement in Russia amounts to almost nothing,
Mhm.
except several projects here and there, but they don't really represent like a movement
Mhm.
Hmm.
that's like capable of setting up stuff or like acting strategically or whatever because of the long history of like last 30 years and how it like turned out. And
Hmm.
the whole century prior to that, when like anarchists have been basically wiped out, excluding a couple people.
Mhm.
Um, but right, so yeah, they've been saying like we have to like watch out for these possibilities and pretty making a point that like all that stuff that like Putin said in his speech about like yeah, like this is a fratricide. Do I
Yeah.
spell it right? Fratricide?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Fratricide, yes.
Yeah, like all this like fratricide and like all this like treason and all that stuff, like how actually like he has been doing that same shit like for decades, basically, like murdering political opponents, dissidents, like throwing people in prison, bombing Ukraine, like killing like a bunch of civilians, like thousands and thousands of civilians, and like all this stuff is quite a fratricide. And just like, yeah, like pointing how this both Prigozhin and Putin are basically like speaking, addressing some kind of moral values and
Yeah.
ethics in people, but actually they're the very same people who actually like, commit despicable crimes against those same values and ethics.
Yeah.
Um, but it's kind of like this. I don't know. Like I have that associated with Donald Trump. It's like you can do whatever you want and you can say whatever shit you want, but like as long as you say something, like if you pretend that that's how it is, then that's how it is. Like and
Yeah, I
it's
mean
like
it's
people.
it's this ultimate irony, like you pointed out, with Prigozhin saying, oh, we don't rush Russian blood to be spilled. I mean, he's the guy that's famous for the brutality, right? For executing traitors or whatever with sledgehammers and the like,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's
yeah,
this idea that somehow he's making the humanitarian decision to step back because he doesn't want Russian blood to be spilled, where, over the last year all we've seen him do is talk about how traitors need to die, and where we're setting up firing squads and this, that, and the other thing.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
But
if he wanted really to Russian blood to stop spilling, he probably would have to like stop Putin or something,
right,
or make the real treason and whatnot. And that's actually another thing, is it's not clear like what all this thing was for,
hmm,
because
Yeah.
like basically, like when we're looking back on the coup in Turkey in 2016,
hmm,
or when we compare that, like such events offer a great possibility for consolidating power
yeah,
and for like checking the bases, you know
yeah,
it's like who does what, who thinks what, like just but also a great opportunity to just like seize more legitimacy for the like law enforcement and for like army to do whatever they want, whatever they need to do.
yeah,
So maybe that entire thing has been a setup
yeah,
for like make a certain stabilization in Russia. That's like a certain level of stabilization that Putin needed or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Or maybe they wanted the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian military, to take some steps that would lead to an obvious advantage
hmm,
of the Russian army or the Russian state. I don't know. I guess it's hard to say.
Yeah.
We could speculate a lot, but that's pretty much
I
it. What I have
mean,
to share.
yeah. I
if
mean,
it's
it
yeah,
seems like, sorry, it does seem rather convenient, and of course, it's impossible, like you said, to speculate about these kinds of things, especially this early on. This is ongoing. By the time this episode comes out, there's going to be a lot of other stuff that happened. But it is kind of rather convenient, like you said, in the case of Erdogan, where in situations like this, one can consolidate power. If Putin was maybe feeling that like the population was maybe not fully in support. If there's a little bit more instability, comes right close to Moscow, then maybe people will start caring more. And this leads me to, because you kind of mentioned now the anarchist movement and the like, and I guess and some of the reactions that people across the political spectrum have had to this. Maybe since we have you here, you can give us some background on some of what's been going on with the anti-war movement in Russia and some of the challenges that people have faced there over the last year or so since the full-scale war started.
Right. Well, there's all to talk about. I mean, basically, what they started with is introducing some of the new laws that would help them to keep the population in check and like persecute people for any kind of dissent. So there was this law called sharing fake information or like fakes about the Russian army or about its actions. So, for example, or discrediting Russian army, right?
Mm-hmm,
So, for example, if you said if you go on a Telegram channel, you see, okay, the Russian army bombed Kramatorsk, for example. Yeah, that's a Eastern Ukrainian city. And then you see, okay, there's 100 people died. And then you go to your social media and you write, what the hell, it's what's happening? There's just 100 people were killed in Kramatorsk. Yeah, for example. So what they can do is they can raid your house and they can take your devices and they can put you in prison and saying that you have spread false information about Russian army because Russian army sources like media sources have not claimed such a thing. So that means that you're spreading fake information about what Russian army is doing in Ukraine. And then if you called war a war, right, that would be something persecutable as well.
Right.
Because that's not a war that's the Russian government uses this narrative okay, this is not a war, this is, we're just doing some special military operation.
It's special.
Yeah, it is quite special, I guess. So yeah, I mean, then there has been quite a suppression of protests in the streets in the first months.
Yeah.
I have been participating in these protests, and it's been I can say part of this was in some places where I don't know, I wasn't at the time in Moscow. In St. Petersburg there was significantly more people. I was in my hometown in Siberia, and well, I don't think we were ever more than 50 people or something like that. Maybe 100 at top. And then you have loads of cops, at least the same amount as protesters, if not more. And then people are quite hesitant, and they're not sure, they don't actually believe that their actions will lead to anything. So they're less willing to risk things and to have a physical confrontation or something. And people are actually feel not used to that. I mean, the one thing that can overcome that is an ultimate outrage, when there is nothing else you can do, you just have to fight the cops. But then I think that moment also didn't happen somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah, a bunch of people have been arrested, a bunch of people have been beaten up, there've been cases of torture, there've been cases of imprisonment. Also from day one, there've been people going for direct confrontation, and they have been throwing Molotovs to the cops or to the military, recruitment centers, draft offices, or other administrative buildings that might not even be related to the military. And there's been a whole range of people, different people, very different convictions and ideologies, doing that. And I think repression has been very instrumental to kind of suppress that. Like all these laws they have introduced, and the surveillance has been growing a lot. Like there's been this like smart, camera system, like face recognition stuff that was introduced during the corona, and I think they're kind of they're enjoying the fruits of their work right now, because they do need like a system of like really tight control that allows you to catch and like persecute people who are more or less openly like doing something you don't want them to do.
Yeah, my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, that like in Moscow and maybe St. Petersburg, the facial recognition technology is used even for like paying for the metro and stuff like that, and so there's kind of an unprecedented level of ability to track where somebody is going at any given time. Which I know I was hearing a lot about that during the mobilization last year. And that was a way of kind of catching up with people.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure I can add more to the repression. I think it's like more or less this. And then of course when mobilization started, there's been more of that like tracking down and catching, or just like taking people from the street, or if we're speaking like villages and like countryside, sometimes they've been just like coming with trucks and just like loading people there like potatoes.
Yeah.
And just like taking them away for the front. I think that's pretty much was the situation with repression. There's been like quite outspoken examples of this when there's this like artist in St. Petersburg. Her name is Sasha Skochelenko, and she has been going to the supermarkets and like exchanging price tags on like products in the supermarket with like little cards that say like facts about, or like just like some information about the war in Ukraine. Like this many people were killed, or like this many children were killed, like specifically, or etc. In a way to like inform people about like what's going on, and like keep kind of like the subversive propaganda, or like counter propaganda going.
Yeah.
So she was arrested for that, and now she's like in a Vermont prison. I think she's facing like, I don't remember what's the.
I think I saw 5 to 10 years somewhere.
Something like that.
Just
yeah.
now, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of people like this. There are like many dozens of people who are facing years or decades in prison for various actions, starting with stuff like that, all the way through to, like attacking railroad system, or the administrative buildings of the military, or just like the state original authorities.
I want just to briefly comment more on the events of today and this whole talk. Could it possibly be some kind of a setup or not? And I guess, like, of course, everything is possible, but it's hard for me to see how Putin would be in on it somehow, because it doesn't seem to go in his favor at all. It seems to me that it's a huge embarrassment for him. Although, I mean, maybe if he's very bad at planning setups, which, could be very possible, because he did make kind of stupid decisions, like starting a war in Ukraine. But, if you have someone like Prigozhin, who is like seen as a hero by the nationalist and pro-militaristic part of the society, doing this and saying while doing it that he's doing it, because of the shameful situation the nation is in, and clearly being in conflict with Putin, although they don't, as you mentioned, they don't mention each other's names. Clearly now he was directly in conflict with him, and Putin had a statement saying that these people are traitors, it's a mutiny, and so on. So I don't know. It feels like, and so Boris mentioned that you read this Serbian nationalists who are pro-Russian having fights among each other on the internet, who's pro-Wagner, who is pro-Putin. It already creates confusion and conflict among people who are supporters of the Russian militarism in the regime and so on. So I can imagine that something like that probably is happening in parts of society in Russia as well. I don't know if, Kolya, you have any feeling like what these events could have created among people who would normally be, supporters of the state and the war and so on. Is there any confusion among them now? Like who is the real patriot and who is a traitor?
Yeah, I think there's been quite a bit of confusion around this because, some people are more like, no, like, this is the great struggle of the Russian people, and like you have to obey the president, the supreme commander, stop this, internal strife. The whole West is like, only like, benefits from this and all that stuff. And some people are more like, well, like, you've treated us like shit, and like you've used us like just like how do you call it, like cannon fodder.
Cannon fodder. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there have been like these different takes on that. And I don't think, I'm not sure, like I'm not sure I can say what's been like prevailing among different people. Like I can say that a lot of people who weren't like extremely supporting the regime, but were kind of like, allowing it, or kind of like, accepting it.
Yeah.
Even if though like, they don't like war and they don't like people being killed, they don't have like a strong justification for that in their heads. But they're just kind of like, well, like they're Nazis in Ukraine. We kind of just gotta do something about this.
Right.
I think people started to kind of realize that this is going quite far, and the war comes back to their home.
Yeah.
And I think people are getting scared because they kind of like realize what can be the cost of this.
Yeah, because if I understand correctly, like in Moscow, the mayor announced that like the next 2 days for non-essential workers basically to not go to work. It was kind of some quasi state of emergency type situation in Moscow, which is as home to the center of power as you can get, right?
There's been an official state of counter-terrorist operation declared, which gives the law enforcement quite extensive, even more extensive than now. It gives them quite extensive
powers.
Quite extensive powers, even more extensive than it's been up until now. Like among them is that they don't need to obtain a permission from the court, or like a warrant from the court to enter someone's house. They can just do that. Or they can check your documents and like take you anywhere just because they want to. They don't need any justification for that. Like there were a couple of more things can add it in footnotes if that's essential. But and that has been declared not only in Moscow region but also in several other regions as well.
Yeah. In May, there was an article in Washington Post that was like it used information from the so-called Discord leaks. This was this scandal when this American soldier, young one, had some access to some military intelligence, American, and then he shared it with his friends on Discord. We know about this story. So what was stated in that text was how Prigozhin is in like covert contact with Ukrainian military intelligence and has been for some time, and how he offered like a deal to them that they'll kind of leave Bakhmut, and that in return he would give them some information on the positions of the Russian military, which is kind of pretty wild. But I was thinking about that while this was going on, that possibly something like that is true. Like when I was thinking more of this kind of setup thing, I was thinking more online something like that he made some kind of an agreement with the West through these Ukrainians that he had contact with, and that possibly the goal will be to topple, the power in Moscow, while also having this kind of quasi-noble rhetorics of, being against an unjust war where many people, Russians die, and for the oligarchs and so on. So it would almost give him like a good opportunity to kind of end the war in Ukraine, maybe. Like for that reason, he might have been supported by the West in this scenario. But for a Russian patriotic reason of getting rid of a treasonous government and so on. But obviously he stopped. He gave up on going to Moscow. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows is right. I mean, but one thing that Kolya, you mentioned that there's that popular perception in Russia that to some extent that the Russians are fighting Nazis in Ukraine. We know a lot about Wagner's connections also to, Nazis, Russian Nazis, particularly, right, Rusich division and the like. Do you know anything about kind of the background of the composition of some of these elements in Wagner that are connected to the, Russian far right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for example, there is this quite outspoken neo-Nazi Dmitry Utkin,
So Kolya cut out there a bit, but that name is Dmitry Utkin,
who has been like one of the most prominent commanders of the whole like Wagner.
Yeah, he was Wagner. The group is named after his kind of nom de guerre, right?
Probably, yeah. I don't know about this, but yeah. I mean, like shit. Like, I mean, if you look at his picture, he looks like a fucking German soldier.
Yeah, he's the guy with the SS tattoos on his shoulders or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. He looks like a German soldier from like 1944 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he kind of like speaks for the whole thing, because it's. I mean, basically, Wagner holds this like extreme patriarchal like ideology of like ultra violence. Like, like you come somewhere for money and you do whatever you are asked to do. And then you are like basically, you're like perpetrating like destruction and violence and like domination of like different like state actors on various like peoples or like other like factions, political or not. They've been even having these patches that like have been saying something in line with like, I'm here just for the violence, like, and stuff like this. Like, I mean, this is like ultimate representation of what's the ideological composition of that group is. Like all kinds of like misanthropic, sadistic, violent,
fucking Nazis.
Yeah, basically. But also, I mean, at the same time, like, I mean, pretty much any government does the same thing, but maybe in like different degrees or like covering with like different rhetorics or morals or ethics. But they are just doing this more explicitly and for money. Or like more explicitly for money, talking more about the money and actually making an open business with this, while actually exactly the same thing is happening with like any other state who's like involved with some like arm business or like how do you call it, like arms business, and just like overseas military adventures and
sure. I mean the model, right, for Wagner of the private military corporations is largely kind of based off the U.S. model, right, of Blackwater and the like. Yeah. Guys that did a significant portion of kind of more heavy fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan for kind of contract reasons, which also had a lot of suspicious characters in it.
New Orleans.
Yeah.
Etc. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. They get used on the home front as well. But yeah, I mean, when I think about like somebody like White Rex being like, well, maybe he's actually a patriot. It probably does come from the fact that, they share a kind of common origin in the old Russian far right, like pre 2012, right? Kind of Nazi scene. before I guess, from what my understanding, they got kind of split up over a period of time.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Even the start of the war in Ukraine in 2014 have split the Russian Nazis quite well.
Right. But I'm
They
sure
got
that
them split, all right.
they know each other, right? So like, still,
Yeah.
the White Rex can look and be like, well, I know a couple people over there, and yeah, I guess they are patriots. They're just, on
They're
the
just
wrong
doing
side.
the wrong thing.
Yeah.
The wrong thing for the wrong money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. And also, I mean, we have been discussing all these narratives and like what's people's perception of this, on like different information that is like not very trustworthy, but it's like actually making a lot of impact. And I think there's like a lot of like special warfare going on, in terms of like psychological warfare and like propaganda warfare, because and I think that's like very understated how, like, because when people think war, they think like battlefield, they think like
Right.
fighter jets, they think like bombs and all that stuff. But it's actually a lot connected to the economy, to the propaganda, to the media, to the formulations of the narratives, and diplomacy, a lot of diplomacy. So like a lot of this stuff. And I think it's a really huge mess that is like really hard to take apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we are like speaking about the current situation, it has been a lot of the like this kind of like special warfare happening, in terms of like convincing people of different things, or like creating a picture and like making people panic, and making people like being like really like scared out by like what can happen and all that stuff. And then of course the Russian Volunteer Corps and White Rex and whatnot, like they also get their piece of this. Sure. Because they get to say like, hey, we have told you, like like there is no other way than the armed way, and you see there's like you have to support us because we are the future of Russia, we are the future of this country. And that's quite fucked up, because they are, well, like if they're gonna be fighting in Russia, like one thing they're not going to fight for is freedom. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if it's between the current Russian regime and a mercenary army that's largely staffed with right wingers and ex-convicts and the like, it's not a great situation to be in.
Well, Boris, turns out they don't have to choose. I saw, I guess, when we started recording this, that there's some... Tell me, Kolya, if you know anything about this, but I see that Peskov said that, this is from the BBC, Wagner mercenaries who wish to sign a Ministry of Defense contract can, and anybody participating won't be prosecuted. So you could bring him in, you don't have to decide.
Yeah. From the beginning, it was like just like, okay, you're a prisoner, you can go to Wagner. But actually now they kind of realize that's like a really good move. So, for example, like prisoners can just like working like straight up join the army, and be cool.
Yeah, Lukashenko said that when he made this agreement with Prigozhin, a part of it was that there will be some protection guarantees for Wagner fighters, that they won't be punished for participating in a coup attempt, I guess.
What's one coup attempt between friends?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the Prigozhin was quite close, like from quite close circle of Putin.
Yeah.
And you know how it goes with dictatorships, like, you don't have friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you gotta sort your friends out sooner or later.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's always a lot of testing to see, who stands where and who's loyal and who's not.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I can see how the mind can get super kind of conspiratorial about all this. I mean, the more I think about it,
Yeah.
There's a lot of options. Really.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, like, we've said this from the beginning. I don't like to speculate too much because it's really one of those things where it's going to be a long time before we know.
Also, Prigozhin looks like a very coked up guy.
He's got that.
He has that insane confidence of a guy like that.
Fume glimmer in his eye.
Yeah.
That Denuncio gaze.
Yes, that also might explain some things. I don't know.
Although a different gut.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a little optimistic on your part. I think he's just kind of fucking crazy.
For sure, yeah.
When
But I mean,
I love that being so coked up, you like invade your own country is the optimistic interpretation
like,
on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. These mutants aren't necessarily a particularly new or novel thing. I mean, the Serbian Red Berets, the Unit for Special Operations, did its own kind of mutiny, and they also had kind of similarities to Wagner in that they operated outside of the traditional command structure of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia's army. And
but unlike Wagner, they were very small, so they could just block a highway.
They blocked some highways in Belgrade, but they made a point, right?
They made a point, yes.
And then they killed the prime minister, so that's also a point.
Yes, that they could do that.
Point too. Several points were made.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, mutinies by mercenaries are like pretty a standard thing. That's like what they do often. Like
that's why
you look historically, like they go to war for money, and then if you're not paying them well or there's some problems, they can just take whatever they want to take. I mean,
that's why medieval medieval states had fucking jousting tournaments and shit like that, because if they didn't, they had a bunch of armed people not getting paid walking around becoming bandits, you know, or like trying to take over someone's what do you call them? McMansion. What did they have back then?
Castles?
Something like that. Yeah,
castles,
compounds. Yes. Yeah, there you go. Castles. Yeah. Yeah. Or, if that doesn't work, you can make a crusade. So I guess there's always... I guess it's already
they already have a crusade, which is the war for Holy Russia, I guess, right? I mean, yeah,
indeed.
Well, I mean, this has been kind of a depressing episode. Obviously, a lot of them are.
We never do that.
We never do that. But I'm very happy, Kolya, that you joined us here today, and I hope that we can get you back on some other time when as things develop in, just because we like talking to you.
That's very nice of you.
You don't have to talk about Russia shit. You can talk about anything you like. What are you into?
Well, I mean, our show does have kind of narrow focus, so
it has to be somehow related to complete murderous asshole fascists. That's true.
Yes,
there is a general
That's the only
boundary.
thing. Yes, but
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, unfortunately, I guess fortunately for your show, but unfortunately for the whole world, there's plenty to talk about.
yes.
Yes. Yeah, we found that to be the case.
Or Siberian anarchist history, because I like that too.
Oh, that sounds great. Let's do that. That sounds awesome.
That sounds like a lot more fun. I mean, we had Mark Bray on here talk about, Spanish anarchist stuff.
Oh, hell yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Cool,
now. Part 2 starts now. The entire history of Siberian anarchism.
Okay, I mean, if you wanted, I think we could do it at some point. Yeah.
Great. That's great.
It sounds like a good series for the future.
Yeah.
We never talk about people we like. It's always nice to have a couple.
I mean, there are also some complete murderous fascists in Siberia, quite contemporary as well. So if that's something you'll be into, we can also talk about that.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I thought of a Siberian fascist as pretty scary. I never really toyed with that in my head somehow. I mean, I've had some friends from Siberia, and they're already fucked up. I can't imagine what
kind of fucked up in the way that you guys from Texas are fucked up.
In like the opposite way. So like stories about, I don't know, for instance, getting your tongue stuck to something metal, and then your mom having to like traipse through fucking 6-foot snow walls to like remove your tongue from some equipment somewhere.
It sounds like a childhood story.
Yeah. One I heard was that whenever a friend of mine would say they were cold, and I really hope this isn't common practice, but please tell me. I really wanted to know, actually. They would throw her out into the yard when she was a child, strip her down, and then throw water on her and then tell her to run until she was warm. Please tell me that's not normal. That's not a Siberian thing, right?
Oh well, when children generally like are born in Siberia, it has like this kind of like Sparta element to this. Lake Baikal. Baikal?
Yeah, Baikal. That's where she was from. Actually, was Baikal. Yeah. Well, she said she's from Baikal, but 100 kilometers away. That's what she said.
Oh, okay. That's very close to me as well. So basically, what you do is you go to the cliff on the left side, like on the left shore of Baikal, and you throw kids to.
Oh,
that's what you do. Yes.
Yeah, that's what you do.
You do this in the winter, like when there's ice. You have to do this in January because in December there's no ice just yet.
Yeah, right.
So because usually towards the end of January, it's like it's just the like minus 30 hits, or like minus 35, minus 40, and then the ice gets to the lake. So then you throw kids in there, and they have to like swim under, and they have to show up on the other shore.
Yeah,
and I think at some points of the lake that's about 40 kilometers. So I think so that's what you do. And then you have to ride a tiger back home.
Of course. Okay. Well, I mean, they're everywhere. So, I mean, that's not right. That can't be that hard.
They're not endangered.
No. So that's...
They're like pigeons there, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So, like childhood stories from Siberia about like a tongue sticking to something metal on the street.
Yeah, that's pretty tame now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like thing that happens every now and then, but yeah.
So is that why fascists have sayings like "ride the tiger" and stuff like that? Is it from? I'm sorry, cut that all out. That's going too far. I'm trying to drag this thing out because I'm looking at the time. I'm like, we need like 5 more minutes.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. Word. Well, then we hope to have you back to talk about all that tiger-related child rearing stuff and whatever else you might want to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, there is like pretty nice book that's like about the examples of basically examples of like self-government and like just like straight up like anarchy in Russia, like in the previous centuries, and so on. So there are quite a lot of, I mean, it's kind of like based on this, Peter Jadorlow's thing, like anarchy works. And this is kind of like the Russian extension of it that gives like historical examples from Russia. I am not sure this exists in English language, but like if you guys will be interested to do something about this, I later this year, like starting with like September onwards, I could prepare like a material about this.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. I think our listeners are going to be happy to hear that.
That'd be a good Tenenpod exclusive we'd get, since it's not translated into English.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite exclusive, yeah.
Yeah, nobody can correct us on anything when that happens. It's awesome.
Although we don't like to be too exclusive, except for when we have an exclusive.
If
that makes sense. No?
Yes,
Huh?
I'm with you. I got it now. I'm with you. I'm there. All right, guys. Well, until next time, Kolya, thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate that. Good to do this with you guys.
And if there's any maybe links or anything like that you want us to share, you can send it to us and we can put it in the show description.
Yeah.
Sure,
Absolutely.
I'll pass it to Ray.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Later.
Bye.
Thanks.